Hi guys, thanks for watching me. Hello everybody. Thank you for joining me today for my midweek live stream. I'm Ksenia Trukova. You are welcome on my channel. Please write comments, ask questions, and share your ideas of what to cover and what to talk about. I apologize again that I had to cancel my previous live stream last week because of my migraines. And thank you so much for your support, for your supportive messages, and for your advice, and for your attention and for your patience. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I encourage you. As I said before, to share your ideas, to ask questions, and just to be active, and I will try to be interactive and to read the chat. So today we are going to talk about what is going on in Russia right now, and the next live stream will be dedicated, I think, if nothing major happens, I hope, I'm going to dedicate it to the New Year and celebrating New Year and Christmas and different traditions in Russia and in Ukraine, and of course how the war, the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine affected this area. We will talk about Father Frost and about St. Nicholas and about different traditions and how they are changing in terms of war and decolonization and so on. So we will talk about this. It's also on the one hand it's a light-hearted content, but at the same time it's very important to talk about that and to talk about how the cultural area is changing in terms of events. So today we are going to talk about banning books and writers and persecuting writers in Russia. And I assume that you probably don't know much about that. So like just some general news maybe. So I will give you as much detail as I can and as much background as I can. And I will tell you very interesting stories, and we will talk about why it is very important, and why it is very dangerous and concerning what is going on right now, what is happening now in Russia. I recorded my last video about Alexei Navalny, as you know, and about that Navalny is missing. And we still don't know anything about him and about his whereabouts, and his lawyers, his allies are trying to find him in different colonies and different prisons in different regions of Russia, but they still didn't have any success. And I'm following this story, of course, and you guys were asking if he's still alive. Of course, I don't know that, and nobody knows. But I think I think he's alive, but they're just trying to isolate him. They're trying to take him somewhere where he won't have any contact with people, because Navalny still he was able to deliver messages, even being in prison. It's very important. Even being in prison, he still was capable of delivering important messages, and he was still in touch and contact with his audience, which is fascinating. I don't know how he could do that, being in the circumstances like that and the very harsh conditions. He was still in touch with his audience on social media through his lawyers, and he still delivered the messages. And he didn't lose, according to what we read in his messages and on social media, he didn't lose any like good spirits and sense of humor. He does have sense of humor, and he was making like jokes, and he was talking to his audience in his simple language, as he can. Like we know him for that capability of talking to people using the modern language, not the outdated one, as Putin does, and Putin doesn't know how to speak to the young audience. I mentioned that before, and we talked about that before. So Navalny was still capable to deliver that message, and he was still an opinion leader for the certain group of people, for the certain part of the Russian society, in Russia and, of course, abroad, for those people who left Russia after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started. So he was some kind of opinion leader for those people. And why am I talking about that, about him being an opinion leader? Because that's probably highly likely the strategy, Kremlin strategy right now, because they're trying to put as much pressure as they can on the opinion leaders in different areas, not only in politics, on opinion leaders in the book industry, on publishers, on writers, and we will talk in detail today about that. This is very important. On the scientists, on people who make science popularize the science, or any opinion leaders or bloggers or journalists, so people who can have any influence on the audience, on the certain amount of people, on the certain part of the society, and who can, make people think about something. So they are targeting those people now, and that's why it's important. It's all the chains, the parts of the same chain. Navalny and a campaign against the writers and their books. It's all one big process. They are all connected to each other. Why? Because the presidential elections in Russia are coming, and that's why Putin is trying to isolate all those people, and to isolate Navalny in particular, and to isolate the audience, the Russian society, isolate people from any opinion different from the official one. So everything, as I said, everything what is happening now in Russia is tied to somehow to Putin's presidential campaign. And I'm going to talk about what is happening in the book industry, in the publishing industry in Russia, because the repressions reached that area that was before pretty safe for some reason. It seemed pretty safe. We saw that the media were in danger almost all the time that Putin was in power, and especially after the full-scale war began. But that book industry was still, they definitely used it as a propaganda tool. They published, since the annexation of Crimea, they published a lot of propagandist books, but they didn't ban other other opinion, and the writers who were in opposition to Kremlin, they still could publish their books, they still could say something through their books, and this area was it seemed safe, but we understood that it was safe to the certain extent, and it was safe for the certain amount of time. So it was just a matter of time when they come to this area, when they come to take the books away, when they come to repress the writers. And now we see that that campaign has started. So what am I going to talk about? Let me take a quick look at the chat. Are dissident, or at least organized critical voices, able to find space outside St. Petersburg and Moscow, or are the crackdowns nationwide to diminish all attempts of politicization rather complete. I don't think they can feel safe anywhere in Russia, whether it's Moscow, St. Petersburg, or different Russian regions. And actually, in the small cities, it's even more dangerous. Media, the journalists, the writers, the activists, and politicians, they are under much more pressure in the regions, in the Russian regions, than in the big cities as Moscow and St. Petersburg. And first of all, before I start telling you that story and give you the details of what is going on and give you the names and some information, so I just want to ask you guys if you know what samizdat is. Have you ever heard this word? And if you know, just write a comment what you know about that. And you can even Google, if you don't know this word, you can even try to Google it and tell me what you find. Samizdat. What is samizdat? And I will tell you later what it means. I will explain why Russia is going to have probably a new samizdat era soon. So yesterday, Russian investigative committee agents searched the Zakharov publishing house. It's one of the publishing houses in Russia, which publishes books by Boris Akunin. Boris Akunin is a Russian Georgian writer, very, very popular, very famous, and I will talk about him a little bit later. So they searched the publishing house, Russian investigative committee agents. Irina Bogat, the publishing house's director, told a Media Zona news outlet that there was one employee in the office when law enforcement arrived. When the employee asked to photograph the search warrant, she was denied and her phone was confiscated. So they didn't even show her the search warrant. Bogat believes that a search is connected with the publishing house's decision to not remove Akunin books from sale. So Akunin books, I will explain why, were supposed to be removed from sale. And that's what other publishing houses did because they got scared. But Zakharov Publishing House, they uh, decided to not do that, and they just kept those books. A source in law enforcement told the state agency, news agency TASS, that the search was part of the case against Baris Akunin. On December 18th, Russia's Financial Monitoring Service added Akunin to its registry of extremists and terrorists. So they labeled a very, very famous writer, like a superstar, as extremist and terrorist. Shortly thereafter, the Russian Investigative Committee opened a criminal case against Akunin for so-called fakes about the Russian army and justifying terrorism. The Russian authorities have charged writer Boris Akunin with spreading disinformation. I have to put the sign again, disinformation about the Russian army and publicly justifying terrorism following a prank phone call earlier this month in which Akunin said he has provided support to Ukraine. Well, he was never intended to hide it, that he was providing support to Ukraine and sending some donations. That's what a lot of people who support Ukraine do. But it's in Russia, it's against the law, especially if you send money to the army forces of Ukraine. They will accuse you in supporting terrorism and supporting extremism and so on. That's what happened, but it's not something that they found out. I mean, they did found out it accidentally because of that prank call, but he was never hiding it. He was supporting Ukraine all the time openly. He lives in London, by the way. He left Russia a long time ago, and he lives in London. So who is Baris Akunin? His real name is Grigory Chartishvili. As I said before, he's a Russian writer with Georgian origin. That's why his name is Chartishvili. It's a Georgian last name. Akunin remains one of Russia's most widely read contemporary authors. And as I said before, he's very, very, very famous. So I can't even imagine a person in Russia who doesn't know who Akunin is. It's impossible. Maybe little kids, they don't know, but they will know. And he's famous for his detective stories, first of all. By the way, those stories are translated into many languages and, of course, into English language as well. And you can find them on Amazon. So if you want to support Boris Akunin, you can do that and you can buy his books. Just Google that name, Akunin, and you will find, and you will enjoy it. It's actually a very good reading for the Christmas time and for the vacations. You can take this book for the vacation and read it. These are detective stories, and it's like a retro detective. The setting is the 19th century and then the beginning of 20th century. I love all his detective stories. I read all of them. And his character, the main character of those detective stories, is Rast van Doren, a young guy. Then he, after like the eighth book, he's not that young anymore because he was following like all his life this character. But everybody was in love with this character. Everybody was in love with those books. And I highly recommend you just find it and you will enjoy. After the detective stories, as I said before, he was famous. Most of all, he was famous because of his detective stories. It was he started writing them in very early 2000s, and then he still writes detective stories, but he predominantly switched to the historical like historical prose and research. So he writes about the history of Russia as well. And he was always in opposition to Putin's regime. He was always uh, he always expressed openly his opinion about what was going on in Russia. He supported political prisoners like Mikhail Khodorkovsky back in the day, and he was in different opposition committees, and he took part in the demonstrations during 2010 in Russia after the elections. If you remember, there was a huge mass protest in Russia, and there was some hope that something could have changed, but it didn't. So Akunin was involved in all that, and he was always, as I said, in opposition to Kremlin. I know him personally. I interviewed him a couple of times, and actually we became friends with him and with his wife. And I saw him, met him when he came to Kiev, and I was always in touch with him. That's who Boris Akunin is. And after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, he also co-founded a campaign platform called True Russia, which gathers Russian cultural figures to help Ukrainian refugees and Russians who fled their country. The day Putin sent troops to Ukraine in February 2022, Akunin wrote on Facebook, this is a quote: "Russia is ruled by a psychologically deranged dictator, and worst of all, it obediently follows his paranoia." End of quote. And as I said, before, he was always a prominent critic of the Putin's regime and Kremlin. So what is going on now? They put charges on him. They accused him in terrorism and extremism. They're taking out his books, and they come to search the publishing houses. Uh, so basically, they are canceling him. And this is the irony of what is what is happening, because one of the main Russia's narrative, one of the main propaganda narratives, is the canceling, so-called canceling of Russian culture. They accused everybody of canceling Russian culture. First of all, Ukraine. Then they said that all Western countries and European countries, they all are canceling Russian culture. They canceling Tchaikovsky, although you know that it's not true. You can still hear Tchaikovsky, and you can go to the music hall and listen to Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff and Russian composers. You can still buy books written by Russian writers. It's absolutely not true. And there are discussions in the world about decolonization, about how the Russian culture was dominating for a long period of time, for centuries actually, and the discussions about maybe it's time to pay attention to other cultures, such as Ukrainian culture, for example, and other cultures of the former Soviet countries. But nobody is banning or canceling on the state level, law level, Russian culture. That's absolutely nonsense and absurd. And but Russia pushes this narrative very hard, and as I said, it's one of the main narratives from the beginning of the full-scale invasion, because I studied the texts of the Russian state TV, and they started pushing this narrative from the first days of war. uh, from the first days, they were talking about they're going to put sanctions on us. This is Russophobia, and this is canceling Russians and Russia and Russian culture and so on. And they're still pushing these narratives so very hard. But what they are doing themselves, they're bombing Ukrainian cities, and they're destroying Ukrainian libraries and museums and monuments. And a lot of those museums and monuments and libraries, they contain some elements of Russian culture. For example, they destroyed the only one museum of Sergei Yesenin, the Russian famous poet in Ukraine, or they, as I said, they destroyed libraries with the books, also where Russian books were. So they are destroying Russia, and they are targeting Russian-speaking population of Ukraine. You know that the cities who were bombed the worst, like Kharkiv, for example, they were before the war predominantly Russian-speaking. So they were targeting Russian language and Russian language speakers. So they are canceling Russian culture. Now they are canceling. They are canceling Russian famous writers inside Russia. They don't want people to read their books. They are canceling their books. They're canceling the works of opinion leaders and so on. And while still pushing this narrative. So this is very hypocritical. And now the question is, what will ordinary people do with books of Boris Akunin, for example? And I saw that question on social media, people are asking each other what they should do. Some of them who are not afraid of expressing their opinions, they say they will go and buy Akunin's books wherever they can still find them to support the writer. But a lot of people, and I'm 100% sure that there will be people who will throw them away, who will burn it or do anything with those books just to get rid of them. I'm 100% sure that there are people like that, and they're already doing it. And it doesn't mean they're really in danger. It doesn't mean that those guys from the investigative committee, they will come to each apartment, and they will search this apartment to trying to find those detective stories written by Baris Akunin. But first of all, it's a sign that they can arrest anyone for anything. So they don't like, for example, how you I don't know, you said something and your neighbor heard you said something about Putin or about the war or anything, and your neighbor reported you. And it happens all the time in Russia right now. Let's say your neighbor reported you, and in that case, they can come to your apartment, they can look through your bookshelves, they can, you have Akunin, you read Akunin, who is extremist and terrorist, come with us. And so this is a very good pretext to detain and arrest people for nothing. And everybody is in danger now after that. And the second moment, I wanted to emphasize that they want to, and it's very important, they want to plant that fear in people's hearts. They want people to be scared of anything, of having a book at home. And this is, I think, the main goal of Kremlin and Putin, to make people scared, to plant that fear inside of them. So that's the main thing. And censorship of Boris Akunin's work could signal a new wave of persecution against cultural figures displeasing to Russian authorities. And the process has already started, because a couple of days ago, it's not only Akunin, a couple of days ago, one of Russia's main publishing houses, IST, announced that it would stop releasing not only Akunin's books, but also the works of poet and writer Dimitri Bykov. Dimitri Bykov is also very well-known, famous figure in Russia. Both writers had previously spoke out against the war. And in August, if you remember, I think we even talked about that. I probably recorded videos about that. A Moscow court sentenced Russian writer Dimitri Glusovsky, one more famous contemporary writer, on Monday to 8 years in prison, finding him guilty to deliberately spreading false information about Russia's armed forces. Luckily, Akunin, Bykov, and Dmitry Glusovsky, they all left Russia some time ago, and they all live abroad, so they are not reachable. But you see, Dmitry Glusovsky was even sentenced to 8 years in prison. And I know Bykov and Glusovsky in person as well, and we even worked together, because when I worked on the radio station in Moscow, we were co-hosts with Dmitry Bykov. We had a very interesting radio program, which I loved very much, probably my favorite radio program in my career, because it had a very interesting idea and pretty unique. I've never heard anything like that on the radio. So Dmitry Bykov, he is very, very sharp. He's very intelligent and sharp. And he's like a walking encyclopedia of literature, of world literature. I'm not talking about Russian literature, but he knows a lot. And he's very quick and sharp. And so the idea of that program on the radio, it was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. It was 2012, 2013. And the idea was, I was a moderator of this program. And I would give him an agenda. I would tell him about the events that happened this day. He was not following it, because he's not a news person. I mean, he knew something, but not very much, not as news people are. News people did. And so I would give him the agenda, like this happened and that happened, and Putin said that, and this demonstration was in Moscow, and Duma passed that law, this or that law, such and such law, and something like that. And he would comment on each of those news with the analogy from the world literature. And there was no preparation. That was the main idea of this program. We didn't prepare. So I prepared. I mean, I knew the news, but he didn't prepare at all. So I would give him an event, and he would give me an analogy, and he would break down this analogy and explain it. And it was fascinating. I've never seen anything like that, and like such a sharp mind. And as I said, he's like a walking encyclopedia. And that was a very, very, very interesting program, and you can still find it on Facebook if you put in Russian "Novosti v Klassike." I can post a link in this chat if you are interested, and you can see me with Dmitry Bykov hosting this program, this author. And in one of the programs, by the way, today is his birthday, and today I saw on YouTube, it was some kind of reminder. I saw on YouTube a video where I was reading a poem to him for his birthday on air on this radio station. Another author, Dmitri Glusovsky, who was sentenced to 8 years in prison, we worked on a book together, on a book about Russian language, by the way. It's about canceling Russian culture. As a linguist, I wrote a book about Russian grammar, but it was like in a very it was not academical. It was an audiobook about rules of Russian grammar, but it was like funny and entertaining. And we did a voiceover together with Dmitry Glusovsky, so he was like a co-author of that project, of that book. And so all of them are now outside of Russia, and some of them are under the charges. They are accused of terrorism, extremism, sentenced to some years in prison, and so on. So Russia's regime, Putin's regime, is trying to isolate them and trying to isolate people from the writers who can have some influence on the audience. And one more thing about Dmitry Glusovsky, who was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I recommend you to find the book. I think there is a translation into English. It's called The Outpost. By the way, you can find the video on my YouTube channel. I recorded a small video about that book, Outpost. So why this book is interesting? Because it's kind of prophetic, because Dmitry Glusovsky, if you read this book, you will be surprised how he predicted everything that is going on now in Russia, and with propaganda. It's like scary to read. It's actually a scary book, but it's scary how he predicted all that stuff. And the main idea of this book is that the plot is that Russia kind of fell apart. And that's what a lot of experts says might happen, and Putin is afraid of it. So Russia fell apart into the little parts, and there was still like a Moscow part, central part, but a small one, because the whole country fell apart. And those parts were fighting with each other, and it's some kind of post-apocalyptic reality of after that collapse of the country. And there was a Tsar, and attention, the spoilers are coming, so I apologize, but that Tsar, Moscow Tsar, he invented some kind of secret propagandist weapon, and that secret propagandist weapon is the special prayer. And if you hear that prayer, you cannot like escape it. You cannot avoid listening to this prayer. You are already under the influence, and if you hear that prayer, if people hear that prayer, they start killing each other. And there is no way to escape, no way. But there is only one way. You need to gouge your ears. You need to become deaf with the help of nails. And when you are not physically capable of hearing anything, then you can avoid the influence of that secret weapon, and you can stay human. I think it's a great idea, and I think it shows how Russian propaganda poisons people. And since his books are kind of prophetic, I think that's why. And he was also very. He expressed his opinion openly, and never hid what he was thinking about Kremlin and Putin and Russia's regime. So that's why that happened to him. That's why they sentenced him to 8 years in prison. So The Outpost. The name of the book is The Outpost, by Dmitry Glusovsky. Try to find it. I think I did see it in English, so probably you can find it. Let me go back to the chat. I see a lot of messages, guys. Let me try to. I guess it's spelled Ekaterina Dontsova. I will record a separate video about Ekaterina Dontsova. Yes, I'm planning to do that. This is the lady who announced that she's running. She wants to run for presidency in Russia, and yes, I will record a separate video about her. Uh, okay. What do you think will happen with? That's what the question about Ekaterina Duntsova. As I said, I will record a separate video about that. But thank you for the question because I was thinking about it. Uh, I asked you what samizdat was and whether you knew that word, you heard it before. Self censorship. No, it's not a self censorship, but maybe it was a message to a response to some other question. Uh, that sounds interesting. Same with Russophobia. It's actually a reaction to Ukrainophobia. Dmitry Lvovich Bykov, yes, that's his name, is a Russian writer, poet, critic, and journalist. It's from Wikipedia. Dmitry Glusovsky, thank you, Andy, for your messages, for people to know how the names are spelled, so people can find them and find their books. Yes, The Outpost is available in English and even as an audiobook, I think. But the Russian version of The Outpost, the Russian version of the audiobook is great because Dmitry Gluhovsky is doing the narration himself. And he's like an actor. That's why actually I was very happy when they told me he will be my co-author of my book about the Russian grammar, because when he's doing a narration, he's doing it like an actor. He's just great. Yes, that's very helpful to see the name spelled. Thank you so much. So about samizdat, I asked you before what samizdat is. So the samizdat is something that was very well known in Soviet era. It's like a secret, clandestine copying and distribution of literature banned by the state, especially formerly in the communist countries of Eastern Europe. So etymologically, how that word was created, samizdat, sam is self, so like by myself, and is the abbreviation of to publishing. So it's like self-published. It's published by ourselves, by themselves, by people. And people would sometimes just write it, or the whole books. They rewrote the whole books to keep it. Or they did illegally, they did copies on the typewriters like that. So it's a clandestine copying and distributing the books. It was very widely known in the Soviet Union, so people would read like books under the pillow, under the table, secretly. It was dangerous to show it to someone. They were passing it to each other. That was the era of samizdat, the era of repressions against the writers, famous writers. And we can face another era of samizdat in Russia right now, because people might start it again if they want to read the authors they like. They will recreate that samizdat again. So they are going back to Soviet era and even to Stalin era, the era of great terror. And what is going on? It's actually a sign of great terror. As I said before, the main goal of Kremlin is to plant that fear into people's minds and to people's hearts, so they would like go through their shelves in fear and trying to find maybe they have something terrorist, like slightly looking like terrorist or extremist literature, and so and so on. And it goes to some absolutely absurd extent. And I will read you now. I translated it into English. A big post from Facebook. I just want to read it for you. It's very interesting, and it says a lot about what is going on in Russia right now. So let me read this post. I reposted on my Facebook page, so someone from St. Petersburg wrote it. A bookstore in St. Petersburg, December 2023. A buyer enters an empty room and addresses a saleswoman. I need a book, such and he names the author. You have it in your catalog. The woman says, yes, we have it in stock, but I can't sell it to you. Why? because this writer is recognized as a foreign agent and his books can now be sold only in transparent packaging. Now in Moscow, they have made an additional print run in packaging, but these books have not reached us yet. Uh, the buyer is saying, can you wrap this book yourself and bring it to me from your warehouse? I'll pay for the book right away. The saleswoman. Yes, and you'll show me your FSB ID right away. She's making a joke. I don't have an FSB ID. I can show you a Helsinki University professor's ID. And he shows a plastic card with a photo. Are you sure it's Helsinki? Looks at the card suspiciously. Say something in Finnish. Minä puhun vähän suomea. I speak a little Finnish, he says. How did you get here from Helsinki since the border is closed? She asks. Yesterday the border was open. I got here yesterday because you remember that St. Petersburg is very close to. It's very easy to get from Helsinki to St. Petersburg. Do you know how long the border is closed? I do not know, but probably for a long time. Oh, she sighs. Probably the store goods from Finland will close now. I used to love to buy delicious cheese there, she says, because she's now like feeling sad about the cheese. Well, he's going through his backpack. Let me treat you with a delicious cheese. Takes out a small package of soft cheese and puts it on the table. Oh, she looks at the cheese like she doesn't know what to say, then takes the package, twirls it in his hands. Is it expensive? Only €2. Really? I swear to God. The saleswoman leaves and returns with a book wrapped in a transparent package. So he actually bought a book for cheese. The customer pays, unwraps the package, and puts the book in his backpack. Woman, horrified. What have you done? The book should be in the package. So I bought the book from you. Now it's mine. And in the packaging of the book, it's impossible to read. The saleswoman looks at the buyer, then at his backpack, and then bursts into laughter. The buyer looks at the saleswoman and starts laughing with her. End of story. At the end of story, they laugh, but you understand that it's actually not funny at all. It reminds us about Soviet times, about the fear people had. They're trying to sell those books under the table to exchange them for cheese. It's just not the reality of 2023, 23rd. And Russia is going to the past, is moving to the past, while other countries are going to are moving to the future, are looking into the future. Some of them maybe not have that, maybe are not that successful in moving towards the future, but at least they are looking into the future. But Russia is always looking into the past, and to the most horrifying periods and pages of that past. So that's the reality of nowadays in Russia. And as I said before, I think it's a beginning of something big, of a terror like in Stalin era, because they're targeting the opinion leaders, they're targeting writers, bloggers, activists, film directors. You remember the story of Yevgenia Berkovich, who is in prison now, and she has two adopted daughters, and she's a theater director, and she was arrested for terrorism as well. So they are targeting the opinion leaders. And Boris Akunin, that writer who I start my live stream with today, he wrote in the article on his website, a seemingly minor event, the banning of books, the declaration of some writer as a terrorist, is actually an important milestone, he wrote. Books have not been banned in Russia since Soviet times. Writers have not been accused of terrorism since the Great Terror, end of quote. And I agree with him that it's a very important milestone. It's a very important milestone, and it's the beginning of some big process. And unfortunately, this process is not very optimistic. So we will see what will happen next, and we can even guess. We can even name some people who might be under the pressure after Akunin, who can be persecuted after Akunin. And unfortunately, it's highly likely that it might happen. And again, it's all tied into this presidential campaign and the elections. So the closer to elections in March, presidential elections, the scarier is everything in Russia. So let me look at the chat. The outpost is available in English, as I read before. Okay, I think I wrote almost all your messages. Thank you again for the question about Ekaterina Duntsova. I will definitely talk about her. This is very interesting. Thank you so much. I guess that you are already like in a Christmas mode, and maybe some of you left already on the vacation. So please, uh, mm, don't forget to like and subscribe, to recommend this channel to your friends if you find it interesting, of course. And I will record new videos, and I will go on there next week with my midweek live stream, and we will talk about Christmas and New Year traditions in Russia and in Ukraine, and how the war affected those traditions. Thanks as always. Demons and monsters roam the earth, seemingly all powerful, and yet they fear the spoken or written word, Daniel says. Thank you again for all your messages and questions. And that's it for today. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.